You know what I hate? Bye weeks. You know what I love? Football. Well, this week in the Big Ten was certainly made for me and you and all of the football lovers out there because we've got as much of it this week as we are going to see any week for the remainder of the season. All 18 Big Ten teams are in action. We've got 9 games across the slate, which means it is big on big across the board for the first time this season. My Week 7 preview is next here on Big Nation.
From Pasadena to Piscataway, College Park to the Coliseum, Seattle to State College, Columbus to Camp Randall, the Zoo to the Rock, and everywhere in between. This is where Big Ten fans gather to talk America's premier national conference with your host, Big Ten Ted. All Big Ten, all year long. This is Big Nation.
And welcome to the midway point of the 2025 college football season. I'm going to say what you're thinking right now. How the hell did we get here so quick? Wasn't it just preview magazine season? Wasn't it just like 90 degrees a little bit ago? Well, here in the Midwest, it was like mid-70s and 80s a couple of weeks ago. But this week, here, the week of the midway season, we've gotten down. It feels like football weather here out in the Midwest where you're talking about 40s at night, 50s and maybe low 60s is like a high temperature during the day. I went outside today and I just wanted to hit somebody. I love this time of year. Of course, 12 regular season games for every team. You got those 2 bye weeks. That's 14. We're sitting right here in the middle at 7. And this is my Week 7 preview within the Big Ten because every team is out there playing this week. There's going to be a lot of screens. There's going to be a lot of YouTube TV multi-views. Let's dive right into it. Why don't we? It all starts on Friday night when the Rutgers Scarlet Knights head out to the West Coast to take on the Washington Huskies. 8 p.m. Eastern on Fox. Once again, as I said, it's on Friday night. Rutgers coming off of a bye. Before that, back-to-back losses to both Iowa and Minnesota. Washington is coming off a 24-20 win over Maryland last week, a game in which they were down 20-0 at one point and needed to rattle off 24 straight to get that win over on the East Coast. Now, I look at both of these teams, I look at both of these offenses, I look at both these quarterbacks. I look at both of these defenses, really. We should throw that in there as well. There will be points and production available. Ethan Kaliak-Manis of Rutgers is playing his best football that he's played in his career so far early this season. Damon Williams is doing what I think a lot of people expected him to do. He's that electric quarterback back there that can make plays both with his arm and also with his legs. And you've got receivers on each team that are playmakers. Okay, you look at KJ Duff, Ian Strong, DT Sheffield for the Scarlet Knights, of course, Mr. Denzel Boston for Washington as well. You look to defense, and that's where I really want to focus in on right now, because when I say points and production are going to be available, it's not just because these offenses are playing really well for the Huskies and the Scarlet Knights. It's just these defenses aren't outstanding. They're not great. Rutgers is 106th in the country in stop rate with 52.6% of their drives ending in a punt, turnover, or turnover on downs. In that same statistical measure, Washington is 87th in the country, sitting at 58.3%. I think in a game where you know that the quarterbacks are this good, the wide receivers are this good, and really that's the best part about either of those teams. I think the key is how do we limit the other team's possession, and how do we maximize what we're doing on the as a team, and specifically on the offensive side of the ball. I think 2 ways to be able to do that, and I think both Washington and Rutgers certainly need to be able to focus in on these things to be able to win, is both running the football and defense right now. I think both of these parts of the game of football, I think, favor the Washington Huskies right now. Rutgers has been a little bit by committee in the backfield, whereas we know who the bell cow is going to be for Washington. We know Jonah Coleman is a guy that can provide more balance to an offense than maybe Rutgers has running the football. Rutgers has been a lot better. It's been like a complete 180. It's been a complete flip in Piscataway, what they're doing passing versus running compared to what we've seen the last 2 years with Kyle Monangai leading up to this point as well. And then specifically on defense, in a lot of metrics, Washington's defense is just a better unit. I laid it out with the stop rate, a percentage. I'm not saying that this is a great defense because it's not a great defense. But I said this in the beginning of the year. If Washington can be that explosive offense with Damond, with Jonah, with Denzel Boston, and they're creating plays and putting up yards, putting up production, putting up points, and then Ryan Walters' defense is like middle of the road, they make a stop here and they make a stop there, that might be good enough to win some of these games. And I think that's got to be the formula for Washington. Do what you do on the offensive side of the ball. I think I look at a lot of the matchups against Rutgers in this game. I think they're going to have a lot of advantage. They're going to have a lot of openings, I think, to create some big plays, certainly down the field as well. Now, I was talking about defense for Washington, and if there's one Achilles heel that I think this Huskies defense is really going to look to attack right now, it's Rutgers' offensive line. They've had a tough time in some of their Big Ten games protecting Ethan Kaliakmanis, but specifically against Minnesota's defensive line in their last game, it was rough. I mean, they allowed 7 sacks, 11 tackles for loss. Rutgers has allowed the 7th most sacks in the country with 17 right now. Ethan started to make some of those pre-2025 Kaliakmanis type of decisions that we've seen. You look at that interception, not really reading the defense all that well, and there were some other throws and decisions that he made during that game that kind of reminded you of 2024 a little bit, maybe 2023 at Minnesota a little bit as well. Washington needs to get Ethan uncomfortable for them to feel comfortable that they can certainly win this game. Washington has just 9 sacks on the year. That's 3rd least in the Big Ten right now. Zach Durfee coming off the edge. We're unsure if he's able to go within this game. But I would expect to see kind of a lot of back and forth between the Scarlet Knights and the Huskies because of their run game. Because of defense, I tend to favor Washington. Of course, being at home at Husky Stadium certainly helps. The Huskies' big line, 10.5-point favorites in this game. I'd probably bring it down to around like 6.5, 7.5, right around that touchdown. I think Rutgers can create some good things against this Washington defense, but it's going to come down to which defense can just make a few plays and like which run game can maybe take enough time off the clock where it kind of limits some of the possessions of the opposition on the other side of the football. Let's move on to Saturday. And of course, when we talk about the Big Ten, we start with big noon kickoff and big noon Saturday. And we've got a rank versus rank matchup, including the number 1 team in all of the land. That, of course, being the Ohio State Buckeyes, 14.5-point favorites going on the road to Champaign, Illinois to take on the 17th-ranked Fighting Illini. The over-under on this game currently sits at 49.5. Of course, Gus Johnson, Joel Klatt, Jenny Taft, and the entire crew. Saturday, 12 p.m. Eastern on Fox. This is a trophy game. This is the Illabuck game. And it's crazy that a trophy game in the Big Ten, this is the year 2025, obviously, has not been played since 2017. That's what happens when you're on opposite ends of the divisional structure for all those years. Ohio State has won 9 consecutive games in this series. Illinois' last win was that year that they went to the Rose Bowl in 2007 when they won 28-21 in Columbus, Ohio. Now, I want to give props, first of all, to Brett Bielema for getting this team right, bouncing back from that 63-10 loss to Indiana a handful of weeks ago. And it really shouldn't be ultra surprising. Bert is a good coach. Okay, like that, I think the result against Indiana was like, it kind of took me by surprise a little bit. We don't normally see a Brett Bielema team just get absolutely run off the building or run out of the building and get boat raced like that. But a really good job being able to respond the next week against USC and then follow it up with a win against Purdue. 2 consecutive wins here for the Illini. Luke Altmaier is playing some really good football. We're talking about back-to-back 300-plus yard passing games for him right now. That's really been the driving force these last couple of weeks to Illinois' success. But when I look at both of these rosters, when I look at some of the matchups on the field in this game on Saturday in Champaign, I feel like this game, it is a 2-touchdown spread right now. For Illinois to be in a 10-point game, maybe even a 1-possession game in the fourth quarter, I feel like a lot of out-of-the-ordinary things need to happen. Like, I'll just kind of list off 3 of them. I'm sure there's more than 3 that you can think about, but for me, these are 3 things that come to mind. Like, and they're very against what's been happening the last couple of weeks. For both the Illini and the Buckeyes. Illinois needs to They need to stay sound in the secondary and not give up big plays. That would be out of the ordinary. Illinois has given back-to-back games. They've given up over 300 yards. USC and Purdue, they're giving up the most pass yards in the conference right now at 252.3 yards per game. That is going to be a very tall task. It's going to be a very big challenge when Julian Sayin, more on him in just a minute, when Julian Sayin is probably the most comfortable and confident that he's been all year. Oh, and you got number 4, Jeremiah Smith on the other side. You got Carnell Tate on the other side. You got Max Clare on the other side. You got all of these great weapons inside Ryan Day and Brian Hartline's offense that's doing what they're doing right now. So out of the ordinary would be Illinois playing a sound defensive game in the secondary. And that's something that it is an absolute requirement that they have to do for them to be able to remain in this game. Another thing out of the ordinary right now would be Julian Sayin making mistakes. I was just saying it. Every single week it seems like he's doing a little bit more. He's doing a little bit more. Like that first game against Texas, going up against a really good Longhorn defense. You can tell, they kind of reined it in a little bit. They wanted to lean on the run game a little bit. They wanted to lean on the defense a little bit and be able to win that way. But it seems like every single week he unleashes a little bit more and unleashes a little bit more. And I think this last game against Minnesota, you saw him. It seemed like he had that full command of the offense that I think that people expected Julian Sayin, a 5-star talent like Julian Sayin, I think, to be able to have this season. So can Illinois force him into making mistakes? That's another thing that needs to happen. I don't necessarily see it as a possibility or a probability, but for the Illini, that's something that needs to take place. And the last thing, Ohio State's defense needs to be out of position. It's the best goddamn defense out there, man. Matt Patricia he's dialing it up. I mean, you lost Jim Knowles. You lost your entire defensive line. You lost a lot of guys, and you might be better from a coaching and a personnel standpoint. It's crazy how good and how just Ohio State continues to reload out there. But is this an Illinois offense that can get Ohio State's defense out of position? That hasn't happened. That would certainly be out of the ordinary right now as it stands. Let's talk about Luke Altmaier a little bit. I talked about how he responded. The whole team really responded after that Illinois loss, but Luke Altmaier specifically. I know Brett Bielema, when he was the head coach at Wisconsin, it was very much a physical run game and defense type of approach. But, him and Barry Lundy Jr. have kind of had to adjust. This offensive line has not been great, specifically in pass protection. Also, certainly plowing forward in the run game as well. Like, the run game isn't outstanding this year. It's very much Luke Altmaier working the ball down the field to Hank Beatty and some of the other options out there. Luke Altmaier has combined for 718 yards over the last 2 games, and the ball does not hit the ground all that often. He needs to have a great game. Like, if he has an I shouldn't even say, yeah, I'll say that. If he has an A- game, Illinois will not come within 2 scores. He needs to have an A or an A+ football game. He needs to be on the money. And I think for that to happen, this offensive line, let's go back to out of the ordinary for a minute. Okay, this is an offensive line that is allowing some of the most sacks in the country right now. Out of the ordinary would be for them to protect Luke Altmaier all game long. Okay, and this is a Ohio State front that is freaking nasty up there. So if they can find however that works, whether it's Altmaier getting rid of the football quickly, some short pass game, maybe that sets up some stuff with the run game as well. However they manage to do that, however Barry Lunny Jr. schemes that up, I think that's what they need to do. Because I think if you go to that drop back game, you go to that 3-yard, 3-step, 5-step drop back game for Luke Altmaier, and you're kind of hoping your offensive line is going to protect him. I think you're hoping and praying at that point. Because Ohio State they've just got dudes on top of dudes on top of dudes, certainly up front. I mean, like Purdue, for example, not a great team, obviously. 8 tackles for loss against Illinois. So it's not just against a team like Indiana, but you're also talking about Purdue. I think they played pretty well against USC, but I think for the most part, the entire story for Illinois' offensive line is that they haven't really played all that well. I expect Ohio State to certainly take care of business. I expect Ohio State to go on the road and win and probably cover this game. But if Illinois can be sneaky, they can be scrappy, maybe they force a turnover or two, the longer that this game is like covering the spread for Illinois, the more that this crowd is going to get into this game, the more that, hope builds up for Brett Bielema's football team. So, Ryan Day and the Buckeyes, they want to be able to kill that as early as possible in this contest. Let's move on to a group of 3 quick hitters here this weekend. Let's start with the UCLA Bruins, fresh off of that big upset win, their first win of the year against Penn State last week. Jerry Neuheisel getting carried off the field, all that good stuff. They go on the road to face Michigan State. The Spartans are 8.5-point favorites. The over-under 55.5. That's Saturday, 12 p.m. Eastern on Big Ten Network. I think it's very clear the Bruins are playing a lot more inspired with Tim Skippert as their head coach, and then especially last week offensively with Jerry Neuheisel taking over this thing after Tino Sinceri stepped out the door a little bit, which is maybe something that I wouldn't have expected. This was very much a situation last week. They could have rolled over and died, but man, did they show a lot of fight. When Penn State kind of kept on coming back into that game last week, UCLA always seemed to have an answer and always seemed to be one step ahead of Penn State during that specific game as well. This seems to me to be a battle of quarterbacks. I know there's some good pass catchers. You've got Jack Valling. You've got Nick Marsh on the side of Michigan State. You've got Quasi Gilmer on the side of UCLA. I get that. But overall, there aren't a ton of great redeeming qualities surrounding either of these two teams outside of the quarterback, so they've got to play well. Michigan State has not been a good team defensively this year. They've got to find a way to keep the legs of Nico Iamaleava in check. Penn State certainly couldn't do that last week. So this is an intriguing game. Can UCLA continue to build that momentum and build that confidence? It would not surprise me if UCLA follows it up by going on the road and winning at Michigan State. This is a 9 a.m. body clock game for the Bruins. I know a lot has been made of the travel for teams so far this year, so we'll see how that all goes into consideration. But that's going to be a fun, intriguing game that you can maybe have on your second or third screen in that noon time slot. Okay. We got Northwestern going on the road to Beaver Stadium to take on Penn State. The line for this one, Vegas still, they believe in the Nittany Lions. 21.5-point favorites Penn State is. The over-under sits at 48.5. It's Saturday, 3:30 p.m. Eastern on FS1. I think the first half of the first quarter, like the first couple of possessions for Penn State, it's going to tell us a lot about where James Franklin has this team right now. You go back to the first 3 games of the season, there were games against like Villanova, FIU, and some of those other teams where they didn't exactly get out to a roar and start. Those Lions weren't roaring even in those games. James Franklin, Andy Koldenicki, Jim Knowles, this coaching staff has got to get this team fired up. If that loss to UCLA and your back's completely against the wall, because let's not like sugarcoat it. If you lose again, you're not making the playoff. Yeah, I know that remains a schedule where you got to play Ohio State and you got to play Indiana. Okay, so you got to start building that confidence. You got to start building that momentum against a team like Northwestern. Northwestern is a plucky, a pesky team this year in the Big Ten. They're that stereotypical Wildcat type of team that we've seen over the years. But at home, and I'm really curious to see how the crowd reacts, because if we see a game where it's like 10-3 Penn State, middle of the second quarter, they're going to get restless. And you know some of the chants that they've been chanting, and you know like the mindset of where things stand with the fan. Penn State, you need to just run the ball. Okay, just pound the football. I know you'd like to get some confidence going with Drew Aller a little bit, and I think this is a game where you can kind of like try some things. Joel Klatt, I know, mentioned it on his show. Like, Drew Aller does not seem comfortable. It just does not seem fun what's happening. So maybe it's a chance for them to maybe make some adjustments and figure some things out at home against Northwestern. But the Wildcats allow the 4th most rushing yards in the Big Ten. So just run the damn ball, run it up the middle, lean on your line, lean on Katron Allen, lean on Nick Singleton. Do your thing. Do your thing. Last game in this group is a real interesting game, a battle of 4-1 teams. You've got Nebraska sitting there, a 6.5-point road favorite, going on the road to take on the Maryland Terrapins. Maryland is coming off their first loss of the year, and to be honest with you, if Mike Locksley didn't turtle that game away against the Huskies, this should probably be an undefeated Maryland team. I think Maryland's playing a lot better than I expected them to play. 48.5 is the over-under in this one, Saturday, 3:30 p.m. Eastern on the Big Ten Network. Malik Washington is going up against an experienced secondary that is giving up just 75 yards per game through the air so far this season. And when you look at what Maryland, like this in so many different ways, this is like the stereotypical Mike Locksley Maryland team. You got a good quarterback that can sling it. You've got receivers that can catch the ball. You know, the Jaleel Farouks of the world, the Shalik Knotts, the Octavian Smith. They've proven that they can make plays down the field. O-line and run game, not great. They got some decent defensive backs, but overall their defense is average to maybe below average. It's just what Maryland has been under Mike Locksley. But there have been some games during the Locksley era where these types of teams have given some other teams a little bit of trouble. So, I mean, Nebraska, they played Michigan. They played Michigan State. That's not the test of what a true talent like Malik Washington is going to give them. So how are they going to respond in the face of that? Is this still going to be a secondary that is absolutely going to lock down Maryland? If that's the case, Maryland will not score a lot of points. Maryland will not win, because if they can't throw the ball, they're not going to have a lot of success. This is not a team that's going to run the ball ultra well. I mean, I talked about the run game. I talked about their offensive line. I think that's it's just the fact of the matter right now. I look at the other side a little bit. You know, guys like Jalen Husky, Dante Joyner and company, the defensive backs for the Terps. I mean, if they can keep this Nebraska passing offense at bay, I tend to still favor Nebraska in going on the road and getting this win and coming out with a W and continuing to build that momentum because of what they have. I believe in their offensive line a lot more if it comes to that. I believe in the run game led by Emmett Johnson, of course, if it comes to that as well. So I think overall, Nebraska is the more talented roster. Nebraska is the team that should win this game. This has been a game in years past where it's sneaky and you've got a single point spread where that Nebraska falls maybe in previous years. This is another opportunity for Matt Rule to prove that this Nebraska team is different. I can see Nebraska winning by a couple of scores. I could also see Maryland winning by like 3 or 4 points in this game. This one is really intriguing to me. I think it's one of the most intriguing Big Ten football games this weekend. All right, staying in the mid-afternoon time slot, it is The game of the week, CBS. You finally got one. You finally got a big regular season game. They've kind of gotten the short end of the stick in this Big Ten television deal, but they got the Indiana Hoosiers, the 7th-ranked team in the land, going on the road to Autzen Stadium to face off against the 3rd-ranked Oregon Ducks. The line on this game started at 10.5. It is now down to 7.5 in favor of the Quacks. The over-under is 55.5. Vegas expecting a good amount of points, a lot of offense in this game. Saturday, 3:30 p.m. Eastern on CBS. Brad Nessler, Gary Danielson, Jenny Dell will have the call. So much talk about quarterbacks. And these are two of the best quarterbacks in all of college football. Dante Moore and Fernando Mendoza are in the top 5 in the Heisman Trophy odds right now, and rightfully so. But as good as they are, and they're really good, and their play is going to go a long way to determining which team wins this game, I think this game is won or lost at the line of scrimmage. This game will be decided in the trenches like all Big Ten football games certainly should be. I want to take a quick rewind back to last year for Indiana, when they faced off against Ohio State, when they faced off against Notre Dame. Now, I get rosters change, a lot changes from year to year. I'll kind of explain the similarities in just a minute, but overall, this Curt Cignetti, Mike Shanahan scheme, they averaged 2.2 yards per carry against the Buckeyes and against the Irish. Those defenses were able to shut down the run game. And this is a RPO heavy scheme. Everything is really centered around that specific type of concept within what the Hoosiers want to do. Fast forward to this season, okay? The game that they've struggled in, the game at Iowa in their last contest, both teams coming off of a bye, by the way, so there's plenty of time for both Dan Lanning and Curt Cignetti to prepare for this contest. But Iowa gave up just 2.7 yards per carry in that contest. And I think there was a clear blueprint, and I think there was a clear game plan that Iowa put forth in that game against Indiana. First of all, it was winning the battle at the line of scrimmage. It was their defensive linemen playing on the other side of the offensive line. They got a lot of tackles for loss in that game. They were playing really well. That's just the battle first of all. And then they blitzed 66% of the time. And then the corners on the outside, which I thought Indiana would have an advantage and would make like difficult for Iowa. But Iowa stepped up to the plate. TJ Hall, Deshaun Lee, etc. They all stepped up to the plate. And they played tight physical man coverage. And those are 3 concepts, and that is a blueprint that can be used to defend Indiana's RPO system and RPO scheme very efficiently. Like, it's been proven. If Indiana can't run the football, that makes things a lot more difficult to get this timing-based offense really going in the right direction. I think they had everybody talks about Mendoza, and everybody talks about the passing attack against Illinois, but look at the yards per carry against the Illini. Nobody was touching them until they got like 6 to 7 yards down the field a lot of times. It's the run game that really starts Indiana's success going down the field. And then we take a look at Oregon's last game. Oregon is coming off a game where they held a Penn State rushing attack. I know a lot has been made since that loss, and of course Penn State's loss to UCLA, but I still think that Penn State has a better offensive line and a better run game that, in terms of talent in the backfield, that Indiana does. And not taking anything away from the Hoosiers, I still kind of feel that way about Penn State. And this is more about Oregon than it is about Penn State or anything else. But Oregon held Penn State to under 2 yards per carry in the first half, and that springboarded them to that big victory a little bit later on during that game. I know Penn State kind of got it going a little bit later, but overall, Bear Alexander played the best game of his career. Amari Washington played like Amari Washington has been playing in the middle out there. And here's what I want to say about Indiana's offensive line and why I compared this to last season. You've got 3 returning starters on this offensive line from last year, and I don't know how much better they are this year. I know there's a lot that goes into returning production, and automatically it's assumed that, if a guy's returning, he's going to be this much better or he's going to be that much better. But I don't think that's the case. I think the right side of this offensive line for Indiana, not very good. Like in pass protection specifically, the 11 pressures against Iowa, 6 of them were allowed by the right guard and the right tackle. What is that? Bray Lynch and Khalil Benson, I believe it was, on that side. And then you look at Oregon. Like, if you're Indiana, you better do well on first down. You better do well on second down, because what we saw from pass protection of Indiana against Iowa, and these are better players up front of the defensive line for the Ducks than it was against the Hawkeyes in the last meeting for the Hoosiers. If you get into 3rd and 6 or longer, Mateo Uyunglele, Tatum Tuioti, they're going to wreak havoc. And they're probably going to wreak havoc a lot during this game. So I could just kind of look at that matchup at the line of scrimmage, and it's tough. It's going to be a tough go for Indiana. I think they got to try to scheme something up. Do you kind of get off some of these quick passes and see if you can create 4, 5, 6 yards on first down that way? Do you maybe do some more quick hitting plays instead of the longer developing, maybe RPO type of stuff? I know Fernando Mendoza gets rid of the football quickly, but is it just catch the snap and deliver the ball and let the guys create in space? I don't know. I know that I think it's going to be a pretty difficult matchup for Indiana in this game, but I'm really curious to see how they go about this. I think on the other side, Indiana has a smaller defensive line. Tyreek Tucker is the only significant player on this Hoosier defensive line that is plus 300 pounds. And this Oregon offensive line is one of the biggest offensive lines out there. Can Oregon engage and stay engaged and get this run game going a little bit? The thing I look at when I look at Indiana, they're smaller, but they're athletic and they're aggressive and they're quick. So if they can shed blocks, they could really disrupt what Oregon tries to do in the run game. Indiana plays a lot of zone coverage. They're going to get D'Angelo Pons back for this game. That's their top corner on one side. I think outside of Pons, Oregon's got a big-time matchup, I think, on the outside with the amount of weapons that they can throw at you. With Decorian Moore, which I assume they're going to try to get D'Angelo Pons matched up on Decorian Moore as much as humanly possible, but Malik Benson, Gary Bryant Jr. coming out of the slot, Kenyon Sadiq, of course, the tight end, in the middle as well. Like, if Oregon, Isaiah World, Alex Harkey, if they can hold up against the Mikhail Kamaras of the world and some of these other athletic pass rushers on Indiana's defensive line, Dante Moore is going to be able to pick apart that zone defense. I firmly believe that. I think he can have a lot of success going down the field. So, Dante, we've seen it. He's a cool customer. You get him at Autzen, you get him at home. It's going to be a tough go. It's a tough place to play. Indiana is the last Big Ten team to go into Autzen and get a victory. You go all the way back to 2004. A lot of people have been throwing out that stat this week as well. So, I think the more I dove into this game and the more I broke it down and the more I watched recent games of the Hoosiers and the Ducks, the more I tended to favor Oregon, especially considering that they're going to have that Autzen Stadium crowd behind them, ESPN Game Day. It's going to be a big game atmosphere. And if we know one thing, a big game atmosphere, Autzen can sometimes put the crowd in and of itself, the 12th man, they can put a few more points on the board in favor of the Oregon Ducks. Let's move on and let's talk about Big Ten Saturday night. The Michigan Wolverines are the 15th ranked team in the country. They're going to go on the road all the way out to the West Coast to take on USC. The Trojans are 2.5-point favorites. The over-under, 57.5. I think Vegas is expecting both of these offenses to do pretty well. I think they're expecting some points in this matchup. We'll see if I agree. Saturday, 7:30 p.m. Eastern on NBC. Of course, Noah Eagle, Todd Blackledge, and Catherine Tappan are going to have the call in that matchup. This feels not just what the maize and blue and the cardinal and gold signify, but for many different reasons, this feels like classic Pac-10 versus classic Big Ten. You've got a team in USC that's like, it is a Lincoln Riley type of team, even going back to his days at Oklahoma. You got a really good quarterback. You've got great weapons on the outside. You've got an explosive offense that can put up a lot of numbers in the stat sheet and on the scoreboard as well. And then the defense is not outstanding. I'll kind of just put it that way. And then you look at Michigan. This is a team that wants to be physical. This is a team that wants to run the ball. This is a team that wants to play really good defense. And this, I think I've got a lot of the same points about this game that I had against Oklahoma. Which style of play, which tempo is eventually going to win out? Who is going to dictate the pace of the game? Michigan, you go back to last season's meeting between these two in Ann Arbor. The thing that really propelled Michigan, specifically late in this ball game to that victory, were the explosive runs. I don't remember exactly. I didn't write this down. I don't remember exactly how many rushing yards that Michigan got last year against USC. I believe it was over 200, if I remember correctly. But a lot of it was on 4 or 5 runs that they were able to. They just kind of lean on you. 2 yards, 3 yards, 4 yards here. And eventually when they wear you down enough and they scheme up the right concept, bam, 50 yards, bam, 60 yards, bam, 70 yards. Maybe it was Khalil Mullings. Maybe it was Donovan Edwards last year. This year, it's Justice Haynes. This year, it's Jordan Marshall. They're doing the same thing, but they've got better play at the quarterback position with Bryce Underwood. This isn't a completely obvious one-dimensional type of offense. They can work in some play action. Look, they don't have the best weapons down the field, but Bryce Underwood is at the very least a capable quarterback where you get to a 3rd and 5 or longer and he can actually give you a chance to convert a first down instead of just doing a run play of some kind like they did a season ago. So USC needs to be better against the run than they were against Illinois. I was singing the praises of USC specifically on their defense following that game against Michigan State. I thought that, especially the front seven, I thought coming into the season, the front seven would certainly be the strength to this Trojans defense. But against Illinois, they gave up 119 yards combined to Caden Fagan and Khalil Valentine. You throw in what Luke Altmaier was able to do with his legs. You throw in Aiden Lawfrey. How about 171 yards? 5 yards per carry. If they play like that against Michigan, Michigan will win the football game. If you can't stop the run, this kind of goes back to what I was saying at the beginning of this. If you let Michigan dictate the pace of the game, take possessions away from you, chew the clock, time of possession, wear you down, establish physicality, not giving your offense as many opportunities to go out there and create some plays, you're going to run into trouble. So USC's defensive front needs to play probably their best game of the season. That's just in the end what needs to happen throughout this game. And I look at things from a USC offensive perspective. There's no doubt. I know Michigan played Nebraska. Nebraska can certainly do some things throwing the ball, but this is going to be a challenge for Michigan's secondary as well on the back end. I'll say this in terms of pass protection for Maiyava right now. Lincoln Riley said earlier in the week, Elijah Page, their left tackle, he's got a chance to play. They've been kind of mixing and matching some things on the offensive line since then. But if he's not able to find his way back into the lineup, USC's got to find a way to chip. USC's got to find a way to give Maiyava enough protection down the field when you've got Derek Moore, Jayshawn Barham, and company really getting after it. So if Michigan is able to generate that pass rush, get USC off schedule and out of rhythm a little bit, what do they do to try to combat that? Can they kind of slow it down by running the football with Wayman Jordan? And I want to ask some questions to finish off this preview, because a lot of times we talk about the strengths. We're going to talk about Makai Lemon and Jacoby Lane, and we talk about Jade Maiyava. We talk about this explosive offense. We talk about the power run game of Michigan and what they can do pounding off some of these explosive runs. But a lot of times of course, if your strengths are strengths and they play well, capitalizing on that, doing what you do best can certainly lead you to a victory. But a lot of times it's playing better in your weakness versus the other team's weakness that can get you to a W as well. Will Michigan build confidence in the passing game against a poor USC passing defense? Or will USC's pass defense build confidence against a Michigan offense that doesn't have a lot of weapons down the field? I know before at the beginning I said dictating the pace of play, run game versus explosive offense, will kind of go a long way to determining this. I think who wins those questions, whoever answers those questions the best in terms of the weaknesses, in terms of that, I think will determine a lot in this game. Because if USC can, at the very least, contain what Michigan wants to do, prevent the explosive runs, and then they hold these average to maybe slightly above average weapons in check for Michigan, that seems to be a recipe for success for them. But also, you could see Michigan, running the ball fairly well, like a solid 7 out of 10 on their scale. But now if they're able to create bigger plays down the field because of a lackluster USC secondary that's a little bit banged up, that could certainly provide them another path to victory. This is going to be a really fun game to watch. I can't wait to watch this on Saturday night. We're going to finish things off. We got a couple other games on Saturday night. And how about our second trophy game? We've got the Iowa Hawkeyes, 3.5-point favorites, going on the road to face off against the Wisconsin Badgers. The over-under, for good reason, which I will talk about in just a minute, the over-under is 35.5. Haven't had that low of one in a couple of years for the Hawkeyes. Saturday, 7 p.m. Eastern on FS1 from Madison, Wisconsin at Camp Randall Stadium. Look, these are the two bottom offenses in the Big Ten in terms of total offense. These are also the top two run defenses in the Big Ten. You can see where Vegas got that 35.5 right now. I want to say this about Luke Fickell and the Wisconsin Badgers. Last week, I think, was going to show us a lot, right? They lost to Maryland a couple of weeks ago. They had that bye week. What kind of fight was this Wisconsin team going to have coming out of the loss and the bye week? And I thought they had a good amount of fight. This was a one-possession game. This was like an achievable game for longer than I expected. I'll just put it that way for Wisconsin. I thought the defense played pretty well considering what they were going up against. So seeing that fight, seeing that grit, seeing that tenacity kind of coming back a little bit against a high-quality opponent on the road, I think that showed a little bit of signs of life for this Wisconsin program right now. So they go with Hunter Simmons, which was kind of let's just say it was unexpected from a lot of people. Everybody thought Danny O'Neal was certainly the guy going forward, but he showed a little bit of promise. Now, considering how both of these teams are against the run, it wouldn't surprise me ultra much, specifically from a Wisconsin perspective, because they've struggled running the ball. They've struggled getting Dylan Jones going. They've struggled getting Darian Dupree going. It's just no matter who they've played, whether it's been Michigan, whether it's been Maryland, no matter who it's been. It's just that they have not been able to muster up the success with Jeff Grimes coordinating this offense and trying to get this run game going. It wouldn't surprise me in the slightest if Wisconsin goes reverse psychology a little bit and tries to get this pass game going a little bit. Get Vinny Anthony going down the field. Get Trech Kekahuna maybe open for some catch and run stuff. Lance Mason, their tight end, and see if they can get Iowa on their heels that way. Maybe a pass to run situation, soften it up, so maybe you can have some better run lanes running the ball. We know some injuries on the offensive line have kind of hurt the Badgers earlier on this season, but Iowa presents a really big challenge with their defensive line going up against that aforementioned Wisconsin O-line. I think in this type of game, I trust Iowa a lot more. They have a more veteran quarterback. They have a better run-blocking offensive line. They've shown a better ability to kind of get the run game going a little bit, and it's just Kirk Ferentz. I mean, what have we seen the last few years? You get them in a low-scoring, close game, which I don't see this game being really anything other than that. You get him into that type of contest, it usually favors Iowa. I think Iowa probably goes into Madison and gets this victory. Last game, Purdue going to Minnesota. The Gophers are 7.5-point favorites over under 51.5. So Vegas expecting a little bit more offense in this one than it is the other nightcap that I just talked about. Saturday, 7:30 p.m. Eastern on the Big Ten Network. By the way, big win, no after dark games when you've got this many games on the schedule. So I love that. I said earlier this season, I think Purdue is going to get a Big Ten win at some point. This is one where I could see it. I'm not saying I'm predicting it. I think Minnesota is probably going to be the team that ends up getting away with a victory. But Purdue, man, they've shown fight. You can tell that they're just there's a lot more give a damn factor for this Barry Odom team than there was for Ryan Walters last season. The Boilermakers have the fourth best passing offense in the Big Ten as far as total offense and production yards per game goes right now. Ryan Brown has been building some confidence. He can do it with his arm. He can do it with his legs, throwing the ball to Michael Jackson and Nitro Tuggle as well. So we know Minnesota has a really good secondary, of course, led by Coy Parrish and Kerry Brown. Ryan Brown, going back to the other Brown on the side for the Boilermakers, he's been one this season. You know, he's been a little bit of a roller coaster. He's had its ups and downs. He's turned the football over at times. We know that this is a Minnesota defense that wants to capitalize on those turnovers. They forced one. Kerry Brown had a pick last week against Ethan Kaliakmana. So I think if Minnesota can kind of do some things schematically to bait Ryan Brown into some bad throws, that could certainly equate in some extra possessions, take some possessions away from Purdue within this matchup. I look to the other side. Drake Lindsey's going to be good, man. The redshirt freshman from Minnesota, he can sling the ball. Both secondaries are going to have a lot of significant reps defending some play down the field. Darius Taylor from Minnesota sounds like he should be good to go. We saw him a little bit against Ohio State, but considering how that game continued to get out of hand, I think they kind of held him back a little bit as well. Minnesota's defensive line was great last week. 7 sacks against Rutgers, but they have to be aware of Ryan Brown's ability to scoot. They have to be aware of Ryan Brown's ability to run. Yes, I'm sure they want to be aggressive. I'm sure they want to limit the amount of time that he has to throw the football down the field. I understand that. I totally get that. But this is a game. You get to a 3rd and 7 or whatever, you pin your ears back, all of a sudden, where'd he go? Ryan Brown gets outside the pocket, and he kind of creates some plays that way. If I'm Purdue, I'm moving Brown around, whether it's rolling out or some QB run type of stuff. I'm getting his legs moving. That's what I'm trying to do. And I'm trying to run the ball as well as I possibly can right at Minnesota to maybe slow it down a little bit. You know, Devin Maccabee, Antonio Hayes, and some of these other guys. Let's get them going a little bit to kind of create a little bit of balance. But overall, I just think Minnesota's a more talented team, playing at home, playing at night. Minnesota's an underrated atmosphere in the Big Ten. I think both of these places, both Ross-Ade and Huntington Bank, are underrated atmospheres in the Big Ten. But I tend to favor the Golden Gophers to be able to pull it out. But it would not surprise me if this game gets pretty crazy. Purdue has been a little bit of a thorn in the side for the Gophers over the years. Week 7 is going to be a lot of fun. I'm really excited for what this week is going to be like in the Big Ten. So until next time, I'm Big Ten Ted. We will see you in the next one.